What happens when royal controversy meets a razor-edged interviewer, live before millions? Tonight you'll witness the spark that ignited an unforgettable on-air clash between Meghan Markle and Piers Morgan, an interview that began with courtesy and ended in chaos. By the time the segment was over, the audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats, and Piers Morgan was staring down one of the toughest moments of his broadcasting career. The studio lights blazed like 1,000 curious eyes, bathing the set in a sterile glow that mirrored the tension in the air. The theme music faded. The camera zoomed in on Piers, who adjusted his tie, his trademark smirk firmly in place. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back," he began, smooth and composed. "Tonight I'm joined by Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, or as she now prefers, simply Meghan, independent entrepreneur and advocate." The audience clapped dutifully, though a few uneasy glances darted across the room. Meghan entered from stage left, her white silk blouse catching the light beneath a sharply cut black blazer. She moved with calculated grace, a half smile that hinted she already knew how this would end. Piers stood to greet her. "Thank you for being here." "Of course," she replied coolly, crossing her legs as she sat. "Happy to clarify a few things. People always seem confused about me." Her tone was calm, but a faint edge sliced through her politeness. Piers chuckled. "Then let's clear that up tonight. Let me start with what everyone wants to know. Your departure from the royal family. Do you regret it, or was it inevitable?" Meghan tilted her head, blinking slowly. "If you'd been paying attention," she said, voice smooth as glass, "you'd know I left because I had better things to do than play dress-up for the tabloids." A ripple ran through the audience. Gasps. Nervous laughter. "So," Piers pressed, "you'd say the monarchy is mere spectacle, not duty." "I think standing on balconies and waving isn't exactly service," she said, smirking. He made a note, his voice steady. "Yet the monarchy's endured for centuries, supported by people who see it as more than theatrics. Do you think those who stayed, William, Kate, are wasting their lives?" "Not my problem," Meghan said lightly, adjusting her cuff. "If they enjoy it, good for them. Some people thrive on irrelevance," the audience murmured louder now. "And yet," Piers continued, "you benefited from that same irrelevance when you married into it. Don't you think it deserves a measure of respect?" Meghan laughed, a sound too crisp to be genuine. "Please, I gave them relevance. I brought color, literally and metaphorically." Gasps. Piers raised a brow but didn't flinch. "Well," he said evenly, "you're certainly not shy about your opinions. Let's move on. Your relationship with the press? Many believe you court publicity when it suits you, then condemn it when it doesn't. How do you respond?" "I'd say," she leaned forward, eyes narrowing, "that people like you should learn the difference between privacy and secrecy. But then again, if you understood that, you wouldn't have built a career on pestering people." The jab hit. Even the crowd seemed to recoil, but Piers only smiled faintly. "If that's how you feel, Meghan," he said calmly, "then this will indeed be an interesting evening." And it was. The air grew heavy, the polite smile slipping. By the time the cameras stopped rolling, tension pulsed through the room like static. Meghan adjusted the lapel of her blazer, her smile tightening with every breath. The studio lights gleamed on her white blouse, but the shimmer couldn't hide the irritation creeping into her eyes. Piers leaned back, flipping through his notes with deliberate ease. "Let's talk about Harry," he said softly, eyes locked on hers. "Your relationship has fascinated the world. Many believe he's changed since meeting you. Some say he's even distanced himself from his family because of you." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. What came next would make headlines. How do you respond to that? Meghan's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, though her tone dripped with sweetness. "Oh, Piers," she purred, I'm sorry you're so invested in someone else's marriage. Are you happy at home? Do you even have a wife?" The audience collectively gasped. Piers didn't flinch. A faint smile tugged at his lips. "Happily married, thank you. But we're here to talk about you and Harry." "Of course you are," she said coolly, crossing her legs. "Because people like you always need a villain. It keeps the ratings up." "How quaint." Ignoring the bob, Piers pressed on. "Many royal watchers say Harry has become more isolated, more withdrawn, even angrier, since leaving the UK. Do you feel any responsibility for that?" Meghan let out a short, cutting laugh. "Oh, you really believe everything you read in the tabloids, don't you? He's happier than he's ever been. I'm sorry if that ruins your narrative." Uneasy laughter rippled through the crowd. "So," Piers continued, voice still measured, "no regrets, no second thoughts about how it's affected his relationship with his brother, his father, the institution that shaped him?" "None," Meghan snapped, her tone sharp now. "I don't lose sleep over people who wouldn't lift a finger when I needed them. Is that clear enough for you?" Even Piers raised an eyebrow at her sudden edge, though his composure never cracked. "Crystal," he said lightly. "Let's move on then. Your charity work. Some critics say your involvement is more photo op than genuine effort. How do you respond to that?" Meghan leaned back, uncrossing and recrossing her legs with deliberate poise. "Oh, that's rich. If I don't show up, I'm criticized. If I do, I'm accused of vanity. You really can't win when you're me." Piers nodded slowly. "Some might say that's the price of being a public figure. Scrutiny comes with the territory. And some might say," Meghan shot back icily, "that you wouldn't know sincerity if it bit you." Piers interrupted gently, his voice calm. "Please, family show." A few awkward giggles scattered through the audience. Meghan waved a dismissive hand, her smile returning, brittle and controlled. "Fine, let's keep pretending this is civil." Piers smiled faintly at the jab, but pressed on. "You've said the royal family was cold, distant, even cruel at times. Yet several staffers, off the record of course, have described you as difficult, demanding, even manipulative. How do you respond to that?" Her smile vanished completely, replaced by a flash of fury. "I'd say those staffers should grow a spine and say it to my face instead of hiding behind anonymity. Cowards, the lot of them." Even the camera operators seemed to hesitate, sensing the air thicken with hostility. "Still," Piers continued evenly, "there's a consistent pattern in what they say. Could they all be wrong?" "They're bitter," Meghan fired back. "Because I spoke my mind. Because I wouldn't just nod and smile like a good little duchess while they whispered behind my back." For the first time, Piers leaned forward, his tone soft but probing. "Do you think you ever made mistakes, Meghan? That you could have handled things differently?" She blinked slowly, her words dripping with sarcasm. "Oh, sure. My mistake was ever believing this family, or people like you, could be decent." An audible gasp came from the front row. Piers didn't react. He simply straightened his notes, letting the silence stretch. "Meghan," he said at last, voice steady, "you've made it clear how you feel about the royal family, the press, and apparently me. But I have to ask, do you even care what the public thinks anymore? Or is it all just about Meghan now?" Her lips curved into a tight, defiant smile. "I care about what matters in public opinion. And frankly, Piers, that doesn't include you." The audience shifted uncomfortably. A few nervous laughs broke the tension. Piers sat back, his hands clasped loosely in his lap, though his jaw had tightened. "Well," he said softly, "thank you for your honesty. If nothing else, it's illuminating." The cameras cut to commercial, but the tension didn't fade. It clung to the air like static. By now, the audience wasn't just uneasy. They were squirming. Meghan's polished composure was beginning to fracture. And though Piers remained calm, it was clear his patience was thinning. What had begun as an interview was quickly turning into a duel. Two egos, one stage, and no room left for diplomacy. When the cameras came back from commercial, the tension in the studio was thick enough to taste. Meghan sat stiffly on her side of the stage, still immaculate in her white blouse and tailored black blazer. Her arms were crossed, her jaw set, eyes fixed anywhere but on Piers. He shuffled his notes with deliberate calm, the only sound cutting through the uneasy silence. Even the audience seemed unsure now. Applause faltering, whispers dying mid-breath. Piers looked up, his professional smile tight but controlled. "Welcome back," he began smoothly, voice steady. "We're here with Meghan Markle, discussing her journey, her work, and her views on, well, nearly everything." Meghan exhaled through her nose, offering a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover," she said flatly. "Oh, I wouldn't say that," Piers replied lightly, leaning forward. "We've only just begun." A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the crowd. "Let's talk about your departure from the royal family," Piers continued. "You've said before you felt trapped, stifled, unprotected. Do you believe the monarchy itself is fundamentally flawed?" Meghan let out a dry laugh, shifting in her seat. "You really can't help yourself, can you? Always digging, always trying to find fault." "It's a question, Meghan," he said evenly, "not an accusation. Do you believe the monarchy is flawed?" Her eyes flashed. "I believe the monarchy is outdated, a relic, and I chose not to let it destroy me the way it's destroyed so many others." "Clear enough for you?" The audience stirred, a low hum of whispers passing through the room. Piers nodded slowly. "Crystal," he said softly, "but have you ever considered that perhaps, just perhaps, the issue wasn't entirely the institution, but how you approached it?" Meghan's laugh was sharp as glass. "Oh, of course. Blame the woman. How original." "I didn't say blame," Piers countered calmly. "I said consider. Do you take any responsibility for how things unfolded?" Her smirk returned, colder now. "I take responsibility for putting myself first, for once in my life. Something you and apparently half of Britain seem to have a real problem with." The air crackled. Even the audience was restless now, shifting in their seats. Piers pressed on. "Let's move on to your media ventures. The podcast, the Netflix deal, the children's book. Some critics say it feels more like a personal rebrand than meaningful work. How do you respond?" Meghan arched a brow. "Well, Piers, critics always have something to say, don't they? When I was silent, I was a coward. When I spoke up, I was calculating. Maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's people like you. Men who can't stand a woman in control." Piers folded his hands, still composed, but his gaze had sharpened. "Or perhaps," he said quietly, "the problem comes when someone confuses control with entitlement. Do you think your critics might have a point?" Her laugh this time was bitter, almost venomous. "You'd love that, wouldn't you? For me to admit I'm the villain you've always wanted." "Sorry to disappoint." A murmur of discomfort swept through the audience. Even the crew exchanged uneasy looks behind the cameras. "It's not about villains or heroes," Piers said calmly. "It's about choices and consequences." Meghan leaned forward, her tone openly mocking. "Oh, thank you, Piers. Please, enlighten me about consequences. You're quite the expert on public relations disasters." A few awkward laughs escaped from the back rows, but most of the audience sat in stunned silence. Piers' smile thinned. "I've had my share," he said evenly. "But unlike you, I've never played the victim while cashing in on the role." That landed like a slap. Meghan's eyes narrowed to slits. "Wow," she said, her voice low and cold. "You really think you've got me all figured out, don't you? The bitter old man with his little TV show finally gets his moment to take down the Duchess." "That's not what this is," Piers said firmly, though his jaw had tightened. "Really?" Meghan scoffed, throwing up her hands. "Because it sure feels like a witch hunt to me. Maybe next you'll ask if I float when you throw me in the river." The audience gasped, loud and unified this time. Even Piers blinked, momentarily stunned by the audacity of it. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. He drew in a long breath before speaking again, his voice steady but edged with steel. "You know," he began, his tone measured, "I came into this interview hoping for an honest conversation about your choices, your legacy. But it's becoming painfully clear that honesty isn't what you're here for, Meghan. You're here to play the same old game of deflection and insult." Meghan smirked, folding her arms. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "Spare me the self-righteous lecture. You're just upset I'm not melting under your questions like everyone else." The studio fell utterly silent. The tension was thick enough to cut through, and the camera zoomed in on Piers, his fingers tapping once against the desk. "Well," he said at last, his tone deceptively calm, "I think we've given you more than enough time to show the world who you really are. And you haven't disappointed." Meghan arched an eyebrow, leaning back in satisfaction. Piers managed a faint, tight smile. "Let's take another break," he said quietly. The cameras cut to commercial, but not before catching the flicker of something sharp and dangerous in his eyes. When they returned, the atmosphere had shifted. The studio air felt heavier, charged like a storm waiting to break. Meghan sat stiffly, arms folded, chin lifted high. Piers, though outwardly composed, carried a visible tension in his jaw. What had started as a headline interview was now an on-air implosion. The red light blinked on again, and the audience offered a hesitant round of applause. "Welcome back," Piers said evenly, his voice tight with restraint. "We're here with Meghan Markle. Though it seems the conversation we hoped for has taken quite a turn." Meghan rolled her eyes dramatically. "Oh, come on, Piers," she said with a cutting laugh. "This is exactly the kind of spectacle you live for, isn't it?" "Actually, Meghan," he replied coolly, "what I live for is asking real questions and getting real answers, something you seem determined to avoid." Her smile turned smug. "Maybe that's because your questions aren't worth answering." A ripple of discomfort spread through the crowd. Someone coughed. Another muttered a quiet, "Wow." Piers drew a deep breath, visibly keeping himself in check. "All right," he said slowly. "Let's try this one more time. You've said before you left the royal family because you felt trapped, stifled. But do you ever reflect on the fact that you knew, or should have known, what you were stepping into? Do you take any responsibility for that choice?" Meghan let out a dry laugh. "Ah, yes, the classic blame the woman narrative. She should have known her place. How original." "This isn't about place," Piers said firmly, leaning forward now. "It's about accountability. Do you take any?" "I take accountability for not letting that institution destroy me," she shot back. "Does that count?" The audience stirred, some nodding in approval, others visibly uneasy. Piers pressed his lips together. "Very well," he said quietly. "And what about Harry? Many say he's not the same man, that he's cut off friends, family, even his country because of your influence. Do you feel any remorse for how isolated he's become?" For the first time, Meghan's smirk faltered, though only for a second. "Please," she said coldly. "Harry made his own choices. He's a grown man, not some puppet on my strings. But of course, you'd assume otherwise. Anything to cast me as the villain." "That's not what I said," Piers replied sharply. "But you seem awfully defensive about it." Meghan leaned forward, her tone dripping with mockery. "Defensive? No, Piers. I just don't feel the need to justify my marriage to you of all people." "What's the matter, jealous?" Gasps erupted from the audience. Even Piers blinked, caught off guard by her audacity. He straightened, his fingers drumming once on the desk. "I think we're done here," he said quietly. Meghan tilted her head, clearly amused. "Oh, what happened to your tough questions? Run out of steam?" Piers rose to his feet. The entire room froze. Cameras, crew, audience. everyone waiting to see what would happen next. "No," he said, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade. "What I've run out of is patience." Meghan's smirk faltered, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You came here," Piers continued, his tone calm but laced with steel, "with a chance to tell your story, to answer the questions millions have about the choices you've made. And instead, you've spent the past hour being smug, dismissive, and frankly, insulting. Not just to me, but to everyone watching." Meghan started to speak, but Piers raised a hand sharply. "Save it. I've interviewed prime ministers, presidents, and actual royalty. People who disagreed with me but still managed to answer questions like adults. But you—" he shook his head slowly. "You've mistaken this studio for your Instagram feed, thinking you can control every word, every frame, every narrative." The audience sat frozen, every eye fixed on the two of them. "You want to play the victim? Fine," Piers said, his voice rising just enough to fill the room. "You want to play the misunderstood hero? Be my guest, but not on my show. I won't sit here while you insult my profession, my audience, and my intelligence any longer. You can leave, now." The words hit like thunder. Meghan's eyes flashed. For a moment it seemed she might fire back, but instead she gave a short, cold laugh. Unhooking her microphone, she stood and straightened her blazer. "Well," she said coolly, "at least now everyone's seen the real Piers Morgan. Bitter, small, predictable. And now?" Piers shot back without hesitation. "They've seen the real Meghan Markle. Arrogant, entitled, and worst of all, boring," the audience gasped audibly. Meghan's lips pressed into a thin line. Without another word, she turned on her heel and strode off stage, her heels striking sharply against the studio floor. The cameras followed her until she vanished behind the curtain. A moment later, the sound of the studio door closing echoed like the final note of a performance. Piers adjusted his tie, sat back down, and looked straight into the camera. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said evenly, "I believe that just about sums it up. We'll be back after the break." The studio erupted into stunned applause as the screen faded to black. What did you think? Did Piers go too far? Or was Meghan's attitude her own undoing? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this unbelievable moment and want more explosive showdowns, celebrity interviews, and behind-the-scenes drama, hit like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss what happens next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.